These two nail guns are not the same. Although they look really similar, I'm going to take you through all the differences between a brad nailer and a pin nailer. Although these look the exact same, or pretty similar, there's actually some really big differences. And whenever I do an accent wall, I always get asked, should I use a brad nailer or should I use a pin nailer? Which one's more versatile? Because I don't want to spend a lot of money and get both. So first of all, let's talk about the similarities between these two tools. So they are both types of nail guns. So that means that you can use them to fasten things to the wall. So like this accent wall here, I could use a brad nailer or I could use my pin nailer. On this type of trim, I really prefer to use a pin nailer. This is the trim I'm using for this wall, and as you can see, it's pretty thin. A pin nailer is great because it's strong enough to nail this to the wall, but it doesn't actually split the wood. A lot of times when you use a brad nailer on this type of wall, the nails are too big, and so you're gonna actually maybe end up splitting the wood, especially if you nail down here close to the thin part. When I put these two right next to each other, you can actually see the differences a lot more clearly. So this is a lot smaller because this is the pin nailer, and this is a lot bigger. This is the brad nailer. Now, if you want to go into more depth, let's look at the nails. So let's open this up. Here are the nails for the brad nailer, okay? So if you can see, they have this little tiny indent here, and that's the head of the nail. If we head over to our pin nailer, let's take a look at the nails in there. They are really, really, really tiny. Oh my God, they're so thin. And they don't have a head, they're actually headless. Let me just grab this, okay? They look like they're the same from both sides. Now, the only way you can really tell which way to insert them is through these arrows. Now, if you compare these two side by side, I think it becomes a lot more evident, right? That this is the brad nailer. The nails are much thicker and these ones are much thinner. Plus the brad nailer has that head on them. Okay, when you look from the side, and you can see the pin nailer does not. So if you're a novice DIY or you're just starting out, you're only gonna wanna buy one of these. So which one is better, the brad nailer, or should you buy the pin nailer? Now that's totally gonna depend on the type of project you're working on. In my opinion, you should only buy tools as you do projects. I get a lot of people asking me, what are the best beginner tools? And I'm like, don't go and spend thousands of dollars, just buy the tools that you need for this specific project. That being said, the pin nailer is probably one of my favorite tools. I think it's probably one of the most underrated tools, but the thing is, it's not the most versatile. It's really great for doing accent walls with this decorative trim. I really love it for that, but it's not great if you're gonna do shiplap or if you're gonna build any type of furniture. This is not gonna have nails that are strong enough. Now, the brad nailer, everyone knows about this brad nailer because it is so versatile. You'll see it on lots of different types of accent walls, board and batten, shiplap, and I've even used this to build things like a dollhouse for my nieces, or I used it to build drawers as well. So this is really like your most versatile nail gun. Here's some examples of projects that I use these different type of nailers for. When I attach pull wrap to any furniture, I like to use pin nails because the nail head is so small that you actually don't even need to fill it. It's almost invisible. And here's what the cabinet looked like when I covered it with pull wrap. I'll link this as well. Like I mentioned, I like to use this pin nailer for small decorative trim. I especially like to use it for accent walls because it's really lightweight, so when you get up onto a ladder, you can use it easily, whereas a brad nailer I feel like is a little bit harder to use just because it's a heavier tool. Now, when are you going to use a brad nailer? You're going to use a brad nailer for any thick kind of board like shiplap. So when I shiplap my bathroom, I used a brad nailer to make sure that the nails would go through those thick boards. And here's what that bathroom looked like afterwards. I'll link the tutorial for the shiplap as well because it's a great beginner project. I did my board and batten hallway, and again, I use my brad nailer because these boards are anywhere from 3/4 of an inch thick to about 1 inch thick. So you definitely need strong nails to hold that in place. And isn't this just gorgeous? I love how this entryway flows into my board and batten hallway. You can also use a brad nailer when you're making any type of furniture. I made this cool pantry pull-out cabinet, and I used my brad nailer to attach all the different pieces together because brad nails are really strong. Isn't that cool? I love that in my kitchen. Here, let's take a look at the actual holes left behind by the pin nailer versus the brad nailer. So if you see here, These holes are from the pin nailer. They're so small that you actually don't even need to go and wood fill them. When you paint, the nails will just get like covered right up. Now this is the brad nailer, and as you can see, the hole is much bigger, so you definitely have to fill this hole and then sand it and then paint it. So there is a little bit more work involved, but you have to use the right nail for the job. So when I was working on this fireplace, I actually used both nail guns. What I did was I first used my pin nailer to make sure the seam lines up. And then I went in with my brad nailer once I knew it was as good and tight as it could be, and I reinforced it. Now you don't have to do that. It was just because I was one person working on this. If I had a second person to hold it, I could just use my brad nailer. Actually use the pin nailer that has a safety lock here, so you have to hold this down and then shoot it. You're not gonna, if you just try and press this, it won't press in. That's the safety lock on it. And then you can go ahead, once you've held this down, you can go ahead and shoot it. The brad nailer, of course, has its own safety mechanism as well. It's a little bit different. So for the brad nailer, if I try and shoot this, it won't actually shoot anything. Okay, even if you press it down, it won't shoot it. It needs to have pressure on the tip. Okay, so only when I press against something, then it's activated and then you can shoot it. I hope this video was helpful for you to figure out whether you need a brad nailer or a pin nailer. Follow along and subscribe to my channel because I'm gonna be doing a beautiful accent wall. Here's a sneak preview behind me. And I'll be using both my tools so you can see how to build an accent wall with panel molding too.